Welcome back. In the last video, we finished the incredible stories from the book of Numbers 1 to 21, where God gave his people laws to help them live holy lives. We saw how God gave instructions to the priests, how offerings were to be made, and how the people were taught to be pure and set apart. Now, the story continues as the Israelites travel through the wilderness, getting closer to the promised land. Their journey is filled with challenges, miracles, battles, and even unexpected twists. Let's continue this amazing story from Numbers chapter 22 to 36. The Israelites moved forward and camped in the plains of Moab, near the Jordan River, across from Jericho. Balak, the king of Moab, saw everything Israel had done to the Amorites, and he became extremely afraid. There were so many Israelites, and Balak felt completely overwhelmed. He was distressed and said to the elders of Midian, "These people will lick up everything around us, just like an ox eats up all the grass in the field." At that time, Balak was ruling the Moabites. In his fear, Balak sent messengers to a man named Balaam, the son of Beor, who lived near the river in the land of Pethor. Balak's message to Balaam said, "A huge group of people has come out of Egypt, and they are covering the land. They have camped near me. Please come and curse these people for me, because they are too strong. Maybe if you curse them, I will be able to defeat them and drive them away from my land. I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed." The messengers from Moab traveled with payment for Balaam to use his divination powers. When they arrived, they explained Balak's message. Balaam told them, "Stay here tonight, and I will bring back the answer the Lord gives me." So the princes stayed with Balaam. That night, God came to Balaam and asked, "Who are these men with you?" Balaam answered, "Balak, king of Moab, sent them to me. He said there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they are covering the land. He wants me to curse them so he can defeat them." But God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. Do not curse these people, because they are blessed." The next morning, Balaam told Balak's messengers, "Go back to your land. The Lord has refused to let me go with you." So the Moabite officials returned to Balak and told him Balaam wouldn't come. Balak didn't give up. He sent more officials, even more important ones, with an even greater offer. They came to Balaam and said, "This is what Balak says, please don't let anything stop you from coming to me. I will give you great honor and do whatever you say. Just come and curse these people for me." But Balaam replied, "Even if Balak gave me a house full of silver and gold, I can't go beyond what the Lord says. But stay here tonight, and I will see if the Lord says anything else." That night, God came to Balaam again and said, "Since these men have come to invite you, go with them, but only do what I tell you." In the morning, Balaam got up, saddled his donkey, and went with the Moabite officials. But God was angry because Balaam's heart was not fully obedient, so the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, with 2 servants along with him. Suddenly, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword. The donkey turned off the road, into a field, and Balaam beat her to get her back on the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between 2 vineyard walls. When the donkey saw the angel again, she pressed herself against the wall, crushing Balaam's foot. Balaam hit her again. The angel moved ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn left or right. When the donkey saw the angel this time, she just lay down under Balaam. Balaam was furious and beat the donkey with his staff. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she said, "What have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times?" Balaam, still angry, answered, "You made a fool of me. If I had a sword, I would kill you right now." The donkey said, "Haven't I been your donkey all these years? Have I ever done this to you before? Balaam admitted, No. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword in hand. Balaam bowed low, face to the ground. The angel said, Why have you beaten your donkey 3 times? I came to block your way because you are heading down a wrong path. Your donkey saw me and turned away 3 times. If she hadn't, I would have killed you by now, but I would have spared her. Balaam said, I have sinned. I didn't know you were standing in the road to stop me. If you don't want me to go, I'll turn back. But the angel said, Go with the men, but only speak the words I tell you. So, Balaam went with Balak's officials. When Balak heard Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite border, at the edge of Arnon. Balak said to Balaam, Didn't I send an urgent message to you? Why didn't you come right away? Don't you realize I could reward you greatly? Balaam replied, I've come now, but do I have any power to say anything on my own? I can only say what God puts in my mouth. Then Balaam went with Balak to a place called Kirjathuzoth. Balak sacrificed cattle and sheep and gave some to Balaam and the officials who were with him. The next morning, Balak took Balaam up to the high places of Baal, where they could see the edge of the Israelite camp. Balaam said to Balak, Build me 7 altars right here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me. Balak did exactly what Balaam asked, and together they offered a bull and a ram on each of the 7 altars. Then Balaam said to Balak, Stand here by your burnt offering while I go, maybe the Lord will meet me, and whatever he tells me, I'll come back and tell you. Then Balaam went to a high place. God met Balaam there, and Balaam said, I have set up 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each one. Then the Lord gave him a message. Balaam returned to Balak, and there Balak was standing beside his burnt offering with all the leaders of Moab. Then Balaam spoke the message God gave him. He said, How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I speak against those God has not condemned? From the rocky peaks I see them, from the hills I watch them. These people live apart and do not consider themselves as another nation. Who can count even a fourth of Israel's people? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like theirs. Balak was shocked and said to Balaam, What have you done to me? I brought you here to curse my enemies, but instead you have blessed them. Balaam replied, Shouldn't I say exactly what the Lord puts in my mouth? Then Balak said, Come with me to another place. From there you'll only see a small part of them, not the whole camp. Curse them for me from there. So Balak took Balaam to the field of Zophim, on top of Mount Pisgah. There they built 7 altars again and offered a bull and a ram on each one. Balaam said to Balak, Stand here by your burnt offering while I go meet the Lord over there. The Lord met Balaam again and put another message in his mouth. Then Balaam returned to Balak, who was still standing by his burnt offering with the Moabite leaders. Balak eagerly asked, What did the Lord say? Balaam began to speak the message from God. He said, Stand up, Balak, and listen. Hear me, son of Zipporah. God is not a man that he should lie, or a human being that he should change his mind. Has he ever promised something and not done it? Has he ever spoken and failed to carry it out? Listen, I received a command to bless. God has blessed, and I cannot change it. No disaster is seen in Jacob, no trouble found in Israel. The Lord their God is with them, and they shout for joy like a king is among them. God brought them out of Egypt, they have the strength of a wild ox. There is no magic power or divination that can work against Jacob. It will be said about Jacob and Israel, Look what God has done. The people rise up like a lion and stand like a young lion. They will not rest until they devour their prey and drink the blood of the slain. Balak was frustrated and said to Balaam, "If you won't curse them, at least don't bless them." But Balaam answered, "Didn't I tell you that I must do whatever the Lord says?" Balak said again, "Come, let me take you to another place. Maybe God will let you curse them from there." So Balak took Balaam to the top of Mount Peor, which overlooks the wilderness. Balaam said, "Build me 7 altars here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me." Balak did everything Balaam asked, and they offered a bull and a ram on each altar. When Balaam realized that the Lord was pleased to bless Israel, he didn't go off looking for omens, or trying to perform any kind of magic like he had before. Instead, he simply looked out toward the wilderness. When he lifted up his eyes, he saw all the people of Israel camped in their tents, tribe by tribe, and right then, the Spirit of God came upon him. Balaam began to speak the message God gave him. He said, "Balaam, son of Beor, is speaking now, the man whose eyes have been opened. I'm the one who hears the words of God and sees the visions from the Almighty, who falls into a trance but still has my eyes wide open. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob! How lovely are your homes, O Israel! They stretch out like lush valleys, like gardens beside a river, like aloe trees the Lord planted, like tall cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from his buckets, and his descendants will live by many waters. His king will be greater than Agag, and his kingdom will be lifted high. God brought him out of Egypt with the strength of a wild ox. He will devour enemy nations, crush their bones, and pierce them with his arrows. Like a lion he crouches and lies down, like a mighty lion, who dares to wake him? Blessed is the one who blesses you, and cursed is the one who curses you." When Balak heard this, he was furious. He clapped his hands together in anger and said, "I called you here to curse my enemies, but instead you have blessed them not once, not twice, but 3 times. Now go back home. I was ready to give you great honor, but the Lord has kept you from it." Balaam replied, "Didn't I already tell the messengers you sent, that even if Balak gave me a whole palace full of silver and gold, I cannot do anything, good or bad, on my own? I can only say what the Lord tells me. But before I go back home, let me tell you what this people, Israel, is going to do to your people in the days to come." Then Balaam gave one more message from God. He said, "I'm the one who hears the words of God, who knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the visions from the Almighty, who falls into a trance with my eyes wide open. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but he is not near. A star will come out of Jacob, a scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the foreheads of Moab and destroy the sons of Sheth. Edom will become his possession, and so will Seir, his enemy, but Israel will grow strong. A ruler will come from Jacob and will destroy those left in the city." Then Balaam looked at the Amalekites and gave another message. He said, "Amalek was the first of all the nations, but in the end, they will be destroyed forever." Then he looked at the Kenite and gave another message. He said, "Your home is safe, and your nest is set in the rocks. But the Kenite will be destroyed and Ashur takes them captive." Then Balaam gave one final message. He said, "Oh no, who can survive when God does all of this? Ships will come from the shores of Kittim. They will attack Ashur and Eber, but they too will be destroyed forever." After saying all these things, Balaam got up, went back to his own home, and Balak also went on his way. While the people of Israel were camped at Shittim, some of them started to commit sin with the women of Moab. These Moabite women invited the Israelites to join them in sacrifices to their gods. The Israelites ate the food offered to these false gods and even bowed down to worship them. Israel joined themselves to a false god called Baal of Peor, and this made the Lord extremely angry with them. The Lord told Moses to gather all the leaders of the people and publicly put them to death, exposing them in broad daylight, so that the Lord's fierce anger would turn away from Israel. So Moses told the judges of Israel to go and kill anyone who had joined themselves to Baal of Peor. While all of this was happening, right in front of Moses and the whole assembly, as the people were weeping at the entrance of the tabernacle, one Israelite man boldly brought a Midianite woman into his tent. When Phinehas, the son of Eleazar and grandson of Aaron the priest, saw this, he stood up, took a spear in his hand, followed the man into the tent, and ran the spear through both the man and the woman, killing them both in one strike. This act stopped the deadly plague that had already started among the Israelites, but by then 24,000 people had died from it. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Phinehas, the son of Eleazar has turned my anger away from the Israelites. He was fiercely loyal to me, and because of his zeal for my honor, I did not destroy the Israelites in my jealousy. Because of this, tell him that I am making a special covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a lasting priesthood because he was zealous for his God and made atonement for the Israelites." The name of the Israelite man who was killed was Zimri, the son of Salu, a leader from the tribe of Simeon. The Midianite woman who was killed with him was named Cosbi, the daughter of Zur, who was a leader of a Midianite family. Then the Lord spoke to Moses again and said, "Attack the Midianites and destroy them, because they deceived you and led you into sin with their tricks." After the terrible plague that struck Israel, the Lord spoke to Moses and Eleazar. He told them to count all the people of Israel who were 20 years old and older, everyone who was able to fight in war. So Moses and Eleazar gathered the people in the plains of Moab, near the Jordan River, close to Jericho, and began the counting, just as the Lord had commanded. This count included everyone who had come out of Egypt. First, they counted the tribe of Reuben, Israel's oldest son. The total number of men in Reuben's tribe was 43,730. Next, they counted the tribe of Simeon. Their total was 22,200 men. The tribe of Gad was counted next, their total was 40,500 men. Then came the tribe of Judah, the total was 76,500. Next, the tribe of Issachar, their total was 64,300 men. The tribe of Zebulun came next, their total was 60,500. Joseph's descendants were counted next. Then the tribe of Benjamin was counted. Total was 45,600. The tribe of Dan had only one family group. The total was 64,400 men. The tribe of Asher was 53,400. Finally, the tribe of Naphtali, the total was 45,400 men. In total, all the men of Israel 20 years old and older, who were able to fight, added up to 6,01,730. Then the Lord told Moses, "These are the people who will receive the land as their inheritance. The land will be divided among the tribes, with larger tribes getting more land and smaller tribes getting less. Each tribe will receive its portion according to their family groups. The actual location will be decided by casting lots, so the land will be divided fairly." Then the Levites were counted separately because they were not given any land inheritance. The Levites counted were 23,000 males 1 month old and older. This was the list of the people counted by Moses and Eleazar, in the plains of Moab near the Jordan River across from Jericho. None of the people counted in this census were part of the original group, counted in the wilderness of Sinai, except for Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh. The Lord had said that all the others would die in the wilderness, and that is exactly what happened. None of them survived to enter the promised land except Joshua and Caleb. One day, the daughters of a man named Zelophehad came forward to speak with Moses. He is the fourth generation from Joseph. He had 5 daughters. These 5 women stood bravely before Moses, Eleazar the priest, the leaders, and the entire congregation at the entrance of the tabernacle. They said, "Our father died in the wilderness, but he was not part of the group who rebelled against the Lord with Korah. He died because of his own sins, but he had no sons. Should our father's name disappear from his family just because he had no son? Please, give us property among our father's relatives so that his name will not be forgotten." Moses took their request to the Lord, asking for his guidance. The Lord answered, saying, "The daughters of Zelophehad are right. You must give them land as an inheritance among their father's relatives. Pass their father's inheritance on to them." The Lord also gave Moses a new law for Israel: if a man dies and has no son, his inheritance will go to his daughter. If he has no daughter, the inheritance will go to his brothers. If he has no brothers, it will go to his father's brothers. And if his father had no brothers, the inheritance will go to the nearest relative in his family. This is the law for Israel, as I have commanded you. Later, the Lord spoke to Moses again and told him, "Go up to the top of Mount Abarim and look at the land I am giving to the children of Israel. After you have seen it, you will join your ancestors in death, just like your brother Aaron did." The Lord reminded Moses why this would happen. "You disobeyed me in the wilderness of Zin, during the incident at the waters of Meribah. You did not honor me as holy in front of the people." Moses accepted the Lord's decision and made one request. He said, "Lord, you are the God who gives life to every person. Please appoint a new leader for the people, someone who will guide them, lead them into battle, and bring them back safely, so that your people are not like sheep without a shepherd." The Lord answered Moses and said, "Take Joshua, the son of Nun. He is a man filled with the Spirit. Lay your hands on him and present him to Eleazar the priest and to the whole congregation. Give him your authority in front of everyone, so that all the people will follow him." The Lord also said, "Joshua will rely on Eleazar the priest, who will use the Urim to ask for my guidance. At my word, Joshua will lead the people in and out, and the whole congregation will follow him." Moses did exactly as the Lord commanded. He took Joshua and brought him before Eleazar and all the people. Then Moses laid his hands on Joshua and gave him the Lord's instructions, publicly commissioning him as the new leader, just as the Lord had commanded. The Lord told Moses to command the Israelites to make regular offerings to him at the right times. These offerings were to be a sweet and pleasing aroma to the Lord, a way for the people to show their worship and obedience. The Lord said, "Every day, you are to offer 2 lambs that are a year old and have no defects. This is a continual burnt offering. 1 lamb must be offered in the morning and the other in the evening. Each lamb must be offered along with a grain offering, 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with 1/4 of a hin of pure oil. This has been commanded since Mount Sinai as a special, sweet-smelling sacrifice made by fire to the Lord. With each lamb, there must also be a drink offering of 1/4 of a hin of wine, poured out in the holy place. The evening offering must be just like the morning one, the same lamb, flour, oil, and wine, all presented as a sweet aroma to the Lord." The Lord also gave instructions for the Sabbath. Every Sabbath day, the Israelites were to offer 2 lambs, each a year old and without defect, along with a grain offering of 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, and a drink offering. This Sabbath offering was in addition to the daily offerings already being made. At the beginning of each month, there was to be a special burnt offering to the Lord: 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs, each a year old and without defect. Each bull was to be offered with a grain offering. Along with these offerings, there were to be drink offerings. On these special days, they were also to offer a young goat as a sin offering, to make atonement for themselves. All of this was in addition to the regular daily burnt offering and its drink offering. The Lord reminded Moses about the Passover, which was to be celebrated on the 14th day of the first month. The next day, on the 15th day, the Feast of Unleavened Bread would begin. For 7 days, they were to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day, there was to be a holy assembly where no regular work was allowed. On this day, they were to offer a burnt offering to the Lord made by fire, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs, all a year old and without defect. Each offering needed a grain offering, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil for each bull, 2/10 for each ram, and 1/10 for each lamb. Along with these offerings, there was to be a young goat offered as a sin offering to make atonement for the people. These offerings were to be made each day for 7 days, in addition to the regular daily offerings of lambs, flour, oil, and wine. On the 7th day, there would be another holy assembly where no regular work was allowed. The Lord also gave instructions for the Feast of Firstfruits, when the Israelites would present the first harvest from their fields. On this special day, there was to be a holy assembly where no regular work was allowed. On that day, they were to offer a burnt offering to the Lord like the offerings gave on the first day. In the 7th month, on the first day, the Lord commanded the people of Israel to gather for a holy convocation, a special assembly where no regular work was allowed. This was to be a day of blowing trumpets, a day of celebration and remembrance. On that day, they were to offer a burnt offering to the Lord, a pleasing sacrifice like it said earlier. All these offerings were in addition to the regular monthly burnt offering, the daily offerings, and their associated grain and drink offerings, all presented as a sweet aroma to the Lord. On the 10th day of the 7th month, the Israelites were to hold a holy convocation, a day of fasting and no work. They were to offer 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, all without defect, with grain offerings. 1 goat for a sin offering, along with the daily offerings. On the 15th day of the 7th month, a 7-day feast began. Each day required burnt offerings, bulls, rams, lambs, with quantities decreasing daily, starting with 13 bulls on day 1, reducing by 1 each day. Each day also included grain offerings, 1 goat for a sin offering, and regular daily offerings. On the 8th day, there was a final gathering with 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs, grain offerings, and 1 goat for a sin offering. These offerings were in addition to any personal vows, free will offerings, or peace offerings. A man must keep any vow he makes. A young woman's vow can be cancelled by her father if he objects when he hears it. Otherwise, it stands. A married woman's vow can be cancelled by her husband if he objects when he hears it. Otherwise, it stands. A widow or divorced woman must keep any vow she makes. If a husband remains silent, he confirms his wife's vows. If he cancels later, he bears the guilt. These are the laws God gave Moses about vows between husbands and wives, and fathers and daughters. As the Israelites continued their journey, the tribes of Reuben and Gad noticed something important. They had huge flocks and herds, and they saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were perfect for raising cattle. So, the leaders of Reuben and Gad went to speak with Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of Israel. They said, "All the lands the Lord helped Israel defeat are perfect for cattle. Since we have so much livestock, could you please give this land to us as our share? We would prefer to settle here instead of crossing the Jordan into Canaan." Moses replied sharply, "Are you seriously asking to stay here while your brothers go to war? How can you discourage them from entering the land the Lord promised them? This is exactly what your ancestors did when I sent them to explore the land from Kadesh Barnea. When they saw the land, they discouraged the whole nation from entering it, and because of that, the Lord's anger burned against them. That's why the Lord swore that none of the men who left Egypt, who were 20 years old or older, would enter the promised land. Only Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun, were allowed to enter, because they trusted and obeyed the Lord completely. The Lord was so angry, he made the Israelites wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until the whole rebellious generation was gone. And now, here you are, acting just like your ancestors. If you turn away from following the Lord, he will abandon this people again, and you will destroy all of Israel. The leaders of Reuben and Gad came closer and said, "Wait. We want to build pens here for our livestock and towns for our families, but we promise we will join the rest of the Israelites in battle. We will arm ourselves and go ahead of everyone, fighting alongside them until all of them have received their own land. We won't return home until every tribe has taken their land. We don't want land in Canaan, our share will be here on this side of the Jordan." Moses answered, "If you keep this promise, if you arm yourselves and go before the Lord into battle, and if you fight until the Lord drives out all his enemies and the land is fully conquered, then you can return, and this land will belong to you. But if you break your word, you will be sinning against the Lord. And remember this, your sin will catch up with you. Go ahead and build towns for your families and pens for your sheep, but make sure you do exactly what you promised." The people of Reuben and Gad replied, "We, your servants, will do exactly as you command. Our families, wives, children, and livestock will stay here in Gilead, but we will take up our weapons and go fight for the Lord alongside the other tribes, just like you said." Moses made this agreement official in front of Eleazar the priest, Joshua, and the leaders of Israel. He said, "If the people of Gad and Reuben cross the Jordan and fight for the Lord until the land is conquered, then they will have Gilead as their possession. But if they refuse to fight, they must accept land in Canaan along with the rest of the tribes." The tribes of Gad and Reuben promised again, "We will do exactly what the Lord has said through you." So, Moses gave Gilead to Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. They received the lands that had belonged to Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, including all the towns and surrounding villages. The tribe of Gad rebuilt the towns they had defeated already. These were fortified towns with pens for their livestock. The tribe of Reuben rebuilt some of the towns. They gave new names to these towns after they rebuilt them. Meanwhile, the descendants of Machir, from the tribe of Manasseh, went to Gilead and captured it from the Amorites who lived there. So, Moses gave Gilead to the Machirites, and they settled there. Jair, a son of Manasseh, went and captured some small villages in the area and named them Havoth-Jair after himself. Another man named Nobah went and captured the town of Kenath and its surrounding villages, and he renamed it Nobah, after himself. The Lord spoke to Moses and told him, "Take revenge on the Midianites for how they led Israel into sin. After that, you will join your ancestors." So Moses gave orders to the people, "Pick some men to go to war against the Midianites, to carry out the Lord's revenge on them." Moses told them to send 1,000 men from each tribe, making a total of 12,000 men ready for battle. Moses sent them to fight, along with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest. Phinehas carried the holy items and the trumpets used to blow signals. The Israelite army fought against Midian, just as the Lord commanded, and they killed all the Midianite men. Among those they killed were the 5 kings of Midian, Evi, Rekam, Zur, Hur, and Reba. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with a sword. The Israelites took the Midianite women and children as captives, along with all their animals and wealth. They burned down all the Midianite cities and camps, took all the goods and spoils, and brought everything, captives, animals, and treasures, to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the rest of the Israelites who were camped in the plains of Moab by the Jordan River near Jericho. Moses, Eleazar, and the leaders of the community went outside the camp to meet the returning army, but Moses was angry with the officers and commanders who returned from the battle. He said, "Why did you leave all the women alive?" These are the very women, on Balaam's advice, led the Israelites to sin against the Lord at Peor, causing a terrible plague among the Lord's people. Now, kill all the boys and every woman who has slept with a man. But you may keep all the young girls who have never slept with a man. Then Moses gave further instructions. Everyone who has killed someone or touched a dead body must stay outside the camp for 7 days. You must purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd and 7th days. You must also purify all your clothes and anything made of leather, goat hair, or wood. Eleazar the priest spoke to the soldiers, explaining, "This is the law the Lord gave to Moses. Everything made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, or lead must be put through fire to make it clean. After that, it must also be purified with the special cleansing water. Everything that cannot withstand fire must be washed with water. On the 7th day, wash your clothes, and then you will be clean and allowed back into the camp." The Lord commanded Moses to divide the captured spoils from battle into 2 equal parts, half for the soldiers who fought, and half for the rest of the Israelites. From the soldiers' portion, 1 out of every 500 people and animals was to be given to Eleazar the priest as an offering to the Lord. From the Israelites' portion, 1 out of every 50 was given to the Levites, who cared for the tabernacle. The total plunder included 6,75,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 young women. The proper portions were given to the priests and Levites, exactly as God commanded. After the battle, the army officers, grateful that no men were lost, brought a voluntary offering of gold jewelry to the Lord, 16,750 shekels in total, which was placed in the tabernacle as a memorial before God. Moses also recorded every place the Israelites camped after leaving Egypt, as the Lord instructed. They began their journey at Ramesses, leaving on the 15th day of the 1st month, right after celebrating Passover. They traveled through Sukkot, Etham, and Pi-Hahiroth, where God parted the Red Sea for them to cross. They passed through the wilderness, stopping at Marah where bitter water was made sweet, and at Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They continued through the wilderness of Sin, Rephidim, and Mount Sinai, where they received God's laws. Their journey took them through various camps, including Kibroth Hattaavah, Hazeroth, and Kadesh. At Mount Hor, Aaron died at 123 years old. From there, they traveled through Zalmonah, Oboth, and other locations until they reached the plains of Moab, where they camped along the Jordan River across from Jericho. While the Israelites were camped near the Jordan, the Lord gave Moses clear instructions. They were to drive out all the inhabitants, destroy their idols and places of worship, and take full possession of the land in Canaan, which would be divided among the tribes by lot, larger tribes receiving more land and smaller tribes receiving less. God warned that if they failed to drive out the people, those who remained would become a constant source of trouble, like thorns in their sides, and God would eventually treat Israel the same way he planned to treat their enemies. God also gave Moses the exact borders of the land they were to inherit, from the wilderness of Zin in the south to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, from Mount Hor in the north to the Jordan River and the Dead Sea in the east. 9.5 tribes would receive land within these boundaries, while Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh had already received land east of the Jordan. Eleazar the priest and Joshua would oversee the division of the land, assisted by leaders from each tribe. The Lord also commanded that cities be set aside for the Levites, taken from the land of the other tribes. The Levites were to receive 48 cities in total, including 6 cities of refuge where those who accidentally killed someone could seek safety. These cities would be surrounded by pastureland for the Levites' animals and belongings. Larger tribes would give more cities, and smaller tribes would give fewer, ensuring fairness. The Lord instructed the Israelites to establish 6 cities of refuge once they entered Canaan, 3 east of the Jordan and 3 west of the Jordan. These cities would provide protection for anyone who accidentally killed someone, keeping them safe from the avenger of blood, a close relative seeking revenge, until the accused could stand trial. The cities were open to both Israelites and foreigners living among them. God gave clear rules distinguishing murder from accidental killing. Intentional murder using weapons, iron, stone, or wood, required the death penalty, carried out by the avenger of blood. Accidental killings, such as unintended pushes or falling objects, were judged by the community. If found innocent of murder, the person had to stay in the city of refuge until the high priest died, after which they could safely return home. Leaving the city early put the person at risk of being killed by the avenger, without penalty to the avenger. These laws applied to all future generations. God also required at least 2 witnesses to convict someone of murder, and no one could pay their way out of either a death sentence or early release from a city of refuge. Strict justice had to be upheld. The Lord explained that the reason for these strict laws was to protect the purity of the land. The land itself was defiled when someone was murdered, and the only way to cleanse the land was by punishing the guilty murderer. God warned them not to let the land become polluted with innocent blood, because he himself lived among the people of Israel, and the land was to remain holy in his presence. One day, the leaders of the families of Gilead, who were descendants of Machir from the tribe of Joseph, came to speak with Moses and the other leaders of Israel. They had a concern, so they came forward and stood before Moses and the heads of the tribes. They said, "The Lord commanded our Lord Moses to give the land of Israel to each tribe by lot. And Moses was also commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of our relative Zelophehad to his daughters since he had no sons. But here's our concern," they continued. "If these daughters of Zelophehad marry men from another tribe, then their share of land will no longer belong to our tribe. Instead, it will become part of the tribe they marry into. That means our tribe will lose some of its land, and it will go to other tribes. And when the year of Jubilee comes, the special year when all property returns to its original family owners, this land won't return to us. It will remain with the tribe they married into. So, piece by piece, our tribe's inheritance will shrink." Moses listened carefully to their concern, and then he brought the matter before the Lord. The Lord gave a clear answer, and Moses passed it on to the Israelites. The leaders from the tribe of Joseph are right. They may marry anyone they choose, but only if they marry within a family from their own tribe of Manasseh. This way, the land that belongs to one tribe will not be transferred to another tribe. Each tribe must keep the land it was given by its ancestors. Moses explained further, every daughter in Israel who inherits land must marry someone from her own tribe. That way, all the tribes will keep their own inheritance, and no tribe's land will shift to another. Each person must hold on to the land that belongs to their own tribe. The daughters of Zelophehad followed this command exactly. They each married one of their father's relatives, men from the tribe of Joseph. In this way, their inheritance remained within their own tribe and didn't get passed to any other tribe. These were the commandments and judgments that the Lord gave to Moses for the people of Israel while they were camped on the plains of Moab, near the Jordan River, right across from Jericho. That brings us to the end of the book of Numbers, filled with stories of God's guidance, laws, blessings, judgments, and the preparations for entering the promised land. Thank you for journeying through these incredible events with me. If you've enjoyed this series, don't forget to subscribe and follow along for more stories from the Bible as we continue into the book of Deuteronomy, where Moses gives his final words to the people before they enter the land God has promised them.